And for more on the BRICS Summit, earlier I spoke with Ravi Ramamurti. He's a professor of international business and strategy and the director of the Center for Emerging Markets at Northeastern University. Here's what he had to say about why this year's BRICS Summit is different from ones in the past.
Previously, the summit has been focused on issues that all of the countries can agree on. But this bilateral deal making and announcing them to coincide with the summit, I think, is a new development.
Tell us about China's place at the BRICS Summit and the significance of President Xi Jinping traveling to India.
China is the giant among equals. There's no question that when we talk about the BRICS, we have to remember that China and India may have similar populations, but there the similarities end. If you look at the share of world GDP accounted for by the BRICS, more than half of it is accounted for by China. In other words, China's GDP is more than the GDP of the other BRIC countries put together. And the asymmetry is even greater when you look at China's share of world trade in relation to that of the other BRIC countries. It's almost 2/3 of the BRICS contribution is coming from China. So China is a very central player in this club, if you will. But I don't attach any special significance to President Xi going to India because this is how it happens with the summits. They've each gone to each other's countries. I don't think there's any special significance to that.
Since these nations have been meeting, Professor, how far have they come?
Well, you can look at the glass half full or the glass half empty. When the club was formed in 2009, it was when these countries were at their peak, if you will. China was growing at double digits. India was approaching rates of 8 to 9%. And there was a very high optimism about these countries. Since then, if you look at the situation today, the position of these countries in terms of growth has considerably changed. Brazil and Russia are actually in recession. A second year of recession, China's growth rate has slowed. Only India has actually picked up from where it was a few years back. So in that sense, these countries have not really made the progress people expected in 2009. On the other hand, by asserting themselves on the global stage, they have increased and improved their position and their voice in the global community. One example of that is just the share of these, the voting power of these countries in the IMF has finally been modified to reflect their increasing importance. Not nearly as much as it needs to be, but the IMF has finally taken first steps in that direction. And you can go through a long list of other areas in which these countries have greater voice. The G20, for instance, is now the main forum in which global economic issues are discussed. It's no longer the G7. In fact, this year G20 is being chaired by China. So that's a sea change. So in that sense, I think these countries are beginning to get a greater voice on the global stage.
Professor Ramamurti, we thank you for your time.
You're welcome.